It gives me great pleasure to induct Barnaby Evans into the Rhode Island Heritage Hall of Fame.
My pieces often have an intellectual context, but I don't come from the idea first. I come from an emotional state that I'd like to capture, and then I try to give it sufficient structure that it has interest on other levels. And then I try to physically make the object in such a way that it's moving to people. So I grew up on the West Coast. I grew up in Berkeley, Bay Area, but in the mountains, high Sierras, the deserts, Pyramid Lake, Paiute Indian Reservation. A lot of the origin of my work comes from time spent in the mountains. We used to, as a family, spend the whole day cleaning up the desert. And we would pick up litter and pick up garbage and knock apart these old crates that had been left over there. It's probably where I got my ethic of civic engagement and public improvement, that if there was a public place or any place, you should improve it. And any piece of wood we found, we'd set aside. In the sunset, we'd start a small bonfire, and the family would sit there around that small fire. And I can remember it would get darker and darker. You'd be looking at the coals. And then suddenly, at some point, it would get so dark that you'd become aware that the sky was brighter. And you would look up at the night sky, and if you're in the high desert, there are just stars as far as you can see. And that light would illuminate our faces, we'd talk to each other, we'd tell stories, we'd sing songs, and that's my sense of what a family is. So I came here to go to college. I came to Brown University. I arrived in 1971, and I studied biology. And I spent 4 years here getting an SCB in biology. It was actually in ecology and environmental science. And as part of environmental studies, I was taking photographs and films to document different environments. And as I became more and more interested in the documentation of those processes, photography and photographs, I became interested in that process in and of itself. I became good friends with Aaron Siskin, with Harry Callahan, quite fascinating people. Took color, large format, 8x10 view camera negatives, and then enlarged them up to 24 by 30 prints. I just loved what you could do with photographs. I like to make pieces that are halfway between spectacle and sort of a casual comfort. It's a piece called Temple to Milk. And just like so much of my work, it was looking at the question of the sacred, but also making a little bit of fun of the question of sacred. And the idea of the Temple to Milk was to take milk crates, this ubiquitous urban nondescript object you see everywhere, and see if you could make a classical Greek temple out of them. So I got a bunch of friends together, and we made a replica of the Temple to Music in Roger Williams Park, which is this beautiful marble neoclassical little bauble in the middle of the park. But it was again playing with this idea of public, private, what's it mean? And I like to start dialogues. And sometimes you gotta be a little edgy to start the dialogue, but you've gotta start a thoughtful dialogue. I was fascinated with the furor that occurred over burning flags. And I created a piece called Protecting the Flag. It was about the idea of burning the flag. I observed that people were not confronting the issue. They weren't discussing what it was about. I was invited to be in a big show at the RISD Museum. I went and talked to the director. And he said, "Oh, Barnaby, no, please, let's not go there." So I went home and I thought about that, and I just couldn't live with the fact that the piece I wanted to make I couldn't make. So I printed invitations and I mailed it. The director of the RISD Museum called me up like 2 days later and said, "Barnaby, we had a discussion. I do not want a piece about burning the flag in this exhibition." I said, "Frank, it's not in the RISD Museum. It's on the sidewalk in front of the RISD Museum. I'm just doing a piece under freedom of speech in the middle of a sidewalk, and the middle of the sidewalk I happen to have chosen is the front door of the RISD Museum." He said, "Well, people think it's part of the exhibition." I said, "Well, I'm sure you will manage to figure out how to explain to them it's not part of the exhibition." And it was the absolute hit of the show. Everyone went up to the director of the museum and said, "I'm so impressed." And he took credit all night long. He said, "Yeah, you know, it's really important to make a strong statement and all that sort of stuff. When the RISD Museum opened its new wing, I was one of the artists who was asked to do a series of installations there, and it was called Riku's Second Dream. And it was a reference to the Japanese artist Sen no Riku. He was always playing with power, and he did these things. I think they were site-specific installation works. And I was fascinated by what Riku did. And I did a piece which consisted of 2 miles of bamboo suspended throughout the new wing, with a whole series of paths and discoveries. In one of the bays, you would come through the bamboo and you would find a space. And there was an object there on the ground. And there was a red piece of cloth that covered it, so you could not see what the object was. And I insisted to the RISD Museum that no one could know what that object was. And I'm not going to say even now, I didn't know what I was making. I was making this cocoon, this quiet space where one could just rest in the quietness of the space. It's a refuge. Wherever I went, museums, art openings, I felt this hierarchy, this sense of judgment, competition, this pecking order in the art world. And I vowed to try to make an artwork that was absolutely open to everyone, without irony, without a coded hidden meaning that only the cognoscenti would understand. WaterFire came out of that. It was about beauty. It was about a spiritual place in the middle of the city. It was about getting Americans out of their cars and walking through the night and what encounters and discoveries they might find there. Keep it new, keep it fresh, keep it fun. We use WaterFire as a matrix for the urban experience to add so many different things in it. Everyone who comes to WaterFire is part of the artwork itself. You know, over 10 million people have come seeing WaterFire in the last 15 years. I would love to try some totally different things. At the same time, I've put so much effort into WaterFire, I'd like to get it stable on its feet and to still express that quirky, wonderful quality that I've always loved about Providence ever since I came here. In every WaterFire, I can always take a moment to find a quiet place, to just sit and to take in the music and watch people's faces and see the firelight making everyone look beautiful and together, and the city looking spiritual and almost sanctified. It gives me a deep, deep sense of connection and accomplishment and grace. That's what an artist does. We try to connect to people and make their lives meaningful as they see it. And we're so pleased to bring that light into the world.
That's a little high, but I'd like to see it under load. And it's not.
It's sinking!
That's why we test them.